if you're anything like me, or like most of the people that I've met, setting boundaries does not come naturally. It does not come easily, and it does not come without some kind of backlash, especially at the beginning. This is totally normal, and I want to explore a little bit about why that happens to be today in this episode of Squeaky's Cauldron. Welcome to the show. I am Sarah Evergreen, your host. I'm a coach specializing in shadow work, inner child work, boundary setting, and working with deities. Thank you for coming to my wicked little corner of the internet, where we're about to have some fun. Yeah? So, boundaries are a cornerstone of the healing process. Without boundaries, we continue to get hurt, allow ourselves to be hurt. We continue to step into situations and relationships with people that don't serve us or them, that result in abuse, manipulation, being taken advantage of, even just like lower grade feelings of resentment and anger. And not having boundaries leads to not being able to pursue our own goals, not being able to further the life that we want to live. It is absolutely imperative that we have strong boundaries if we are going to stand up and be our true, authentic selves in the world. Setting those boundaries can feel like absolute dog shit. It can bring up feelings of shame and guilt, like even just thinking about setting boundaries with specific people can send you into a complete shame spiral. And it physically doesn't feel good. Many of you who are watching may have come from a background of abuse and manipulation, whether that was in childhood or in later relationships. There's, generally speaking, what I've noticed with my viewers, probably because of the message that I'm bringing out there, is that y'all have, histories that run some level of corollary to my own. This is the work I focus on because of my history. So if you're new here, just a brief little trip in time. I grew up in a household that was both emotionally and occasionally physically abusive. My father displayed narcissistic behaviors, and my mother was a deep enabler and lost to herself. And my dad had issues with anger. We'll just leave it at that. And this led to me being in multiple abusive relationships and then hiding inside of a marriage while I licked my wounds from those abusive relationships. So I have a history of essentially being told that I am not worth showing up, that me showing up as myself is actually dangerous and will bring harm to the people that I care about. I was also the black sheep of the family, still am, and what happens with the black sheep of the family, and you'll get a little bit of this if you go back and watch my scapegoating episode, is that generally speaking, the person who gets cast into the role of the black sheep is someone who is able to see more clearly the abuse that is existent in the family and refuses to toe that line. And this can manifest in a number of ways, often in rebellious behavior, because the idea of sitting with this dynamic and just being okay with it, like everybody else seems to be, feels so incredibly dissonant cognitively and emotionally that it creates a need to express that dissonance in some way. And this, can take the form of getting into drugs, being sexually, what's the word I'm looking for? Promiscuous in dangerous ways, getting into abusive relationships, and essentially just pushing back as much as possible against the given authority figure. So when we start from that place, of being told that our emotions are not important, that our thoughts are not important, that us as beings, as individual beings, because there's often a level of enmeshment in these dynamics as well, that's not important. We aren't actually allowed to exist. By extension, we aren't allowed to have boundaries. We aren't allowed to say, that's not okay, don't treat me that way, don't touch my body that way, don't be in my space this way. None of that is okay. So then we get to the point in our lives when we need to start setting boundaries, when we realize that this behavior that we've been part of, that has come at us and that we've allowed, because at the end of the day, like, what you are experiencing in your life is what you have to some degree allowed to be in your life. When we get to the point where we need to start actually pushing back on that, actually creating boundaries, what will come up is that story that we're not allowed to. That setting those boundaries is in some way being disrespectful to the people who we are setting those boundaries with. Say you need to set a boundary with your mother. The interactions that you have are consistently distressing. Maybe she is overwhelming emotionally and bulldozes you in a way that makes you feel small and makes you feel very, very young, most likely. And you realized, wow, this is not healthy. And when I enter into this dynamic with her, I become a person that I don't want to be. I become a child throwing a tantrum, or I become this mute person, or this can manifest in many different ways. But essentially, you find yourself turning into someone who does not follow the ideals of who you are and who you want to show up as in the world. And so you realize, okay, I need to take some space from her. I need to draw boundaries. I need to be able to say, don't speak to me like that, or I won't engage in this conversation with you. And then even just thinking about it brings up, like, what the fuck? Like, how could I possibly do this? She's my mother. She's taken care of me. She's given me so much. Perhaps it's a mother who says over and over, I've given up so much for you. Everything I've done in my life has been for you. And then immediately that guilt, that shame will start to come up. Who am I? How dare I push back against this? I am not worthy of standing in my own. I am not allowed to stand on my own. I must give everything that I can to her, to this dynamic, to this relationship, whatever it is, because they've given so much to me. Or maybe it's an abusive relationship. Maybe it's you're dating someone who has had such a hard life. Like, they've grown up in an abusive household as well, because usually these things go in tandem. We tend to repeat the cycles that we are ingrained with when we're children. So you have this abusive relationship. This happens a lot with women specifically, where we enter into a relationship with someone who has been hurt so much. And because we have been ingrained with this idea that a good woman is a woman who cares for and nurtures others, we then see this person who's been hurt so badly by life and by the people in their lives, and who has been abandoned so often. Whether that's real or false is all about the story that this other person has decided to cling on to and perpetuate. and feed you. So we see this person who just needs love. This person who's been so misunderstood in their life. And perhaps you've been that person too, this other side, but we'll follow this thread for now. This person who's been left alone, who just needs a hug, who just needs some understanding, who just needs some love, who just needs someone who's going to stick it out with them, who's going to stand up for them, who's going to be with them and accept them regardless. Because all of these behaviors, all of this other abuse, that just comes from them being hurt, which is true. The abuse does come from them being hurt because that's how they understand now how to act in the world, how to get what they need. And it does not absolve them of the responsibility of their actions. This is the thing. No matter how badly you've been hurt, it does not absolve you of the responsibility for your actions. No matter how badly they have been hurt, it does not absolve them of the responsibility for their actions. Back to this dynamic. You are holding that space so hard for this person and allowing yourself over and over and over again to be trampled, to be taken advantage of. Maybe they cheat on you. Maybe they hit you. Maybe they yell at you. Maybe they tell you you're stupid. And then, right after that, after you get mad, after you push back a little, after you break, then they come back and they say, I'm so sorry, it was this, it was this, it was this. Something came up about my family. This is the anniversary of something. I'm going through stress at work. All of which are true and do impact that person. And do not absolve them of the responsibility for their actions. And so in this case, then you take that apology, that excuse, that reason, and you're like, it's okay. I understand. I love you. I'm not going to leave you. And then it gets to the point when you realize that you need to draw the boundary. You need to take space. Even if that's not leaving the relationship, you realize that, no, I do need the time to go spend with my friends. I do need the time to spend time like working on myself, working out, exercising, feeding myself, just being quiet. I do need to draw the line around how they are speaking to me. I do need to hold them accountable when they go out and cheat on me. And then immediately what comes up is, oh, but they hurt so bad. How could I possibly do this to them? How could I be another person to abandon them? And this too is the rhetoric that's going to be fed back to you when you set those boundaries. Whether it's with a person in an abusive relationship or a parent figure that you need to take some space from, or a friend, you need to remember that the guilt and the shame, they're not accurate representations of, how do I phrase this? They're not accurate representations of the truth. They are old programming, or very often current programming, but they're programming nonetheless, and it's programming around your worth. It's this programming that has said, you're not worth taking care of yourself. You're not worth standing on your own. So I want you to know that when that guilt and that shame come up, when you're setting those boundaries, it doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. It's very normal. And in the process of reparenting, those boundaries are going to be set with your parents. And those places, that's the hardest, because that's where the original wounds are. the wounds that gave rise to all this other stuff that feeds into all of your other relationships. Take heart, my dear, that when you're setting those boundaries and those things come up, you can sit with them. It doesn't mean anything about you or your worth or your ability to set boundaries or your need to set boundaries. It is just a response based on old programming, and you can move through this. And if you want accompaniment as you are learning how to set boundaries, learning how to reparent, learning how to sit with these difficult emotions without reacting to them, I'm here for you. You can check out my coaching offers in the link below. Sign up to my email to get like weekly-ish emails about both the moon phases and like stuff like this that I'm, moving through on my own and insights that I'm having. That link is also in the show notes. And before I forget, a quick shout out to my Patreons, Daniela Respress, Valerie Feel, Samantha Oki, and Haisam Ismail. Thank you so much for your support. If you are interested in extended episodes, weekly, or not weekly, but bi-monthly community tarot readings and shout outs on the podcast and YouTube, please check out the link in the description. You are doing a great fucking job. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Whether that anybody is someone on the outside or that voice in your head that wants to keep you small. You are doing a great fucking job. Take care of yourselves. Until next time, my loves, as always, use your voice.